Good evening. Hello. I've had a bit of a change of mind, and I think I will continue reading through the New Yorker article, at least for a bit more. And but before I start that now in this video, a few videos back I mentioned that in the Freedom of Information request to the Countess of Chester Hospital, I noticed that in terms of how the deaths are laid out across the months in the years 2015, 2016, there were no deaths of early neonate babies showing in August 2015 and October 2015. So those columns for early neonate deaths are showing 0. There's just no entry in them. But there are entries in the stillbirths column. So that led me at that time to think, are they miscoding some of these deaths as stillbirths? And if so, why are they doing that? And if they are doing that, and if they were doing that in those 2 cases, and that is what they've done, if it is, then that would put the total number of deaths, i.e. not including stillbirths, but total number of early and late neonate deaths. Just to recap, early neonate is less than 7 days old, and late neonate is between 7 and 28 days after birth. So if they were doing that, that would put the figures up to, for deaths, the mortality rate, not the rate, but the overall figures for 2015 and 2016, the whole of both those years, to at least 19. I say at least because if they've done that with 2 deaths, they may they not have done it with more than 2. And then yesterday, I think it was yesterday, on Twitter, a Twitter user whose handle is at Letby Witch Hunt, made a very, very interesting connection and asked me in a tweet whether a note that was part of the RCPCH report, the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health report that the hospital asked for, and that was published in early 2017 after Christmas, wasn't it? I mean, it took a while for them to actually publish it, but they did their survey, as it were, the year before, Anyway, this the Twitter user goes by the name of S currently, and it's at Letby Witch Hunt. Pointed out this, I've got it in front of me here, a picture of this section of the RCPCH report. It's point 4.45, I think that's what it says, it's a bit blurry, 4.45, and it reads as follows: 2 of the cluster of deaths were not reported. The current policy indicates that not all deaths need to be submitted as DATIX, that's their DATIX reporting system, if they are expected deaths. So if the death is expected, if the death is expected, it didn't need to be reported on the DATIX system. And in 2015 to 2016, only 10 of the 13 deaths were reported as incidents on the neonatal incident summary. So when they say 2015, 2016, 13 deaths, they're not covering those 2 full years, of course. They're not going right back to the beginning of 2015, nor are they going to the end of 2016. They're choosing this period of June to June, I would assume. Yeah, June 2015 to June 2016. To go back to this note, so only 10 of the 13 deaths were reported as incidents on the neonatal incident summary. The definition of quote-unquote expected was not available, but presumed to be that used in safeguarding child death panels, and it was not clear who is responsible for Datix entry. So who is responsible to put entries on the Datix system if it was, i.e. if it was not expected. Other areas in the hospital report well, but the neonatal unit have for some time apparently been less systematic in reporting. So the Twitter account at Letby Witch Hunt asked whether these deaths that should be showing up on the Freedom of Information request for August 2015 and October 2015, which were absent, might there be some connection with this aspect of the RCPCH report? And if so, might, and this is all in the area of might we infer that there's a potential that two of those deaths were not only miscoded as, for whatever reason, if indeed they were, let's say they were miscoded as stillbirths, or simply not put on there at all, even worse. I mean, they're talking about they're less systematic in reporting. Does that extend to what ends up on this Freedom of Information request in terms of showing how many deaths happen month per month? Is it miscoding, or is it missing out altogether? If it's, say it was miscoding, and those deaths that happened in those months, which those two, August and October 2015, ended up as murder charges, but there's no death showing in the early neonatal column at all. But there is there are two, I think, in each case, in the stillbirths column, and they obviously weren't stillbirths if they have been miscoded. But is it possible that there's a kind of a chain we can potentially infer here, that those two deaths were actually deemed expected? It's just an open question at the moment. Were they expected deaths and deemed as expected deaths by the hospital or by the consultants or whomsoever? Starts with the consultants. So were they certainly not unexpected deaths, hence there's no reporting of them? And it's an interesting figure that they say here, 10 of the 13, which might account for those two that were missing off the FOI, Freedom of Information request, and one other. As I've been saying since doing that video about those missing figures that should be there unless there's some other reason that we don't know of. Could there be just one other? That's what I've been saying. Is it at least 19, but possibly is it 20 deaths over those 2 years, from which Lucy Letby was charged with seven of those deaths. So that's even a relatively smaller proportion of the overall number of deaths, which goes against to showing what people have been saying for a very long time now, is that, let's say it was 20 for argument's sake, hypothetically, that there was not only a quote-unquote serial killer on the ward, there was also something else causing an even larger spike of 13 deaths in comparison to the years before, 2014, 2013. And it's that idea. So and so, but how likely is that there's something else going on as well? So it just gives pause for thought, really. I don't know where we can take this at the moment, because we've had the Freedom of Information request. I've made a subsequent FOI request about a number of things, and I'm waiting to hear about them. This area is one of them, and there are other areas as well. But if I do get something back that is potentially useful, I'll share it, obviously. So back to the Rachel Aviv article in the New Yorker. So Lucy Letby was in the initial interviews with Cheshire Police, and they've been asking her these questions, and they ask her, did you, in your own mind, the officer says, have you done anything wrong at all? I'm just recapping the last bit from the last video I did about this article. We're in the New Yorker article now. And Lucy Letby says, no, not intentionally, but I was worried that they would find that my practice hadn't been good, close quote. She said, adding, open quote, I thought maybe I had missed something. Maybe I hadn't acted quickly enough. The officer then says, give us an example. And this is back to the prose of Rachel Aviv. She proposed that perhaps she, quote, hadn't played my role in the team. This is Lucy speaking. I hadn't played my role in the team. I'd been on a lot of night shifts when doctors aren't around. We have to call them. There are less people. And it just worried me that I hadn't called them quick enough. Goes back to the great shortage, great paucity of necessary medical staff there, doctors just not available and not there, and these nurses being left with very high acuity babies and not enough support. Goes back to what Alison Timmis says. It's chaos, the situation's dangerous, it's unsafe is the word she used, unsafe, and the children will die. Just to remind you, Dr. Alison Timmis was another consultant on that unit, and she wrote that in an email to Tony Chambers in late 2015. Back to the article. She also worried that she might have given the wrong dose of a medication or using equipment improperly. See, that's Lucy being put in the situation of being punished. She's being punished, not being told what she's done wrong. And nobody to this day has ever told her what she's done wrong. I mean, they've falsely accused her of crimes, but they never told her what she did wrong in terms of incompetence or anything, or any kind of negligence. They never did, because there wasn't anything there to tell her. Because there was no evidence of that, and there never has been. The officer then asks Lucy, and you felt evil? Lucy answers, other people would perceive me as being evil, yes, if I had missed something. So she's referring back to her notes when she's trying to work out why is she being punished, when she's trying to think, well, what could I have done wrong? What might I have done wrong? And she's 25 years old at this point, and she's so highly conscientious. She's racking her brains to think, well, what could I have done wrong? They're punishing me, but no one's ever come up with anything. No one's ever come up with anything. She went on, it's how the situation made me feel. And indeed, that's exactly it. When you're being hounded, punished, scapegoated, and that is how you're worn down by this sort of bullying and scapegoating and hounding, which at this point has sort of been happening so this is in July of 2018 when the first arrest comes. So but there's been this whispering campaign since right back into 2015. So we're looking at, possibly just shy of 3 years since Lucy Letby's got the sense that people are pointing the finger at her, but never telling her what she's done wrong. So she's being punished and targeted, never being told what she's done wrong, never any evidence for what she's done wrong. You could imagine, couldn't you, being in that situation and just being worn down by it, mentally worn down by it, the stress of it, incalculable stress. The detective said, you put down there, Lucy, that you, quote, killed them on purpose. Lucy says, I didn't kill them on purpose. The detective asks, so where's this pressure that's led to having these feelings come from? Lucy replies, I think it was just the panic of being redeployed and everything that happened. Yeah, she's panicked because people think so badly of her that they've removed her from being a nurse at all and put her on this admin job. And all that training she's had it's like she's thinking, well, what was the? I'm being told effectively that I can't. I'm not able to. They won't let me near a patient now. Won't let me near the babies, but they're not telling me what I've done wrong. So that's that redeployment is not like to be a nurse somewhere else. It's just to be in I think it was a patient satisfaction office and something like that. So there was no interaction directly with patients, no nursing going on for her. So she's effectively been cut off at the knees in a sense and completely undermined, while also never being told what she's done wrong. That's to quote a phrase from, I don't know if he coined it, but R.D. Laing, who was sort of originally a psychiatrist stroke psychotherapist in the 60s and 70s was his main era, I think. A bit before, a bit after. But he coined the phrase of people being put in what he described as an untenable situation in which whatever they did or thought, it was bad for them. They couldn't get out of it, Whatever they did, they felt they'd be punished. And they were being punished, whatever they did. And this is very much what's happening to Lucy Letby here. She's in an untenable situation, and that stress, the mental stress of that, the emotional stress is beyond measure. Everything that had happened, she said. She had written the notes after she was removed from clinical duties, so that's after July, or in July 2016. Yeah, after July 2016. But later, this is an interesting bit, but later, her clinical skills were reassessed and no concerns were raised, so she felt more secure about her abilities. Now, I asked this question on Twitter, and I made an inference here that clearly some of these notes, Rachel Aviv says the notes, so I mean, which maybe there were notes that were written after, but I'm thinking that at least some of these notes are written in the period between being taken off nursing duties and being put on this admin role. So that would have been July 2016 up until the period in which she was told by the hospital management that her grievance process had been successful, had been upheld, and she was due to be coming back in, I think it was in May, towards the end of May 2017, and obviously that was stopped by the police becoming involved because Jayaram and Brewery forced the hand of the management and they capitulated and the police got involved, and then we know what's happened after that. Well, we know the skeleton of it, but we don't, there's a lot we don't know, I think, in terms of what they actually did there and the collusion aspects. But where was I going with that? Yeah, this reassessment of clinical skills. I asked on Twitter, I said, well, so were these clinical skills reassessed as a matter of course while Lucy was in this admin position, the so-called island of lost souls that Jayaram mockingly termed it? Were they being reassessed as a matter of course? And by whom? And by whom? Was it the nurse manager, Arian Powell, or Alison Kelly, or who was doing it? And who? What was the trigger for doing that? What was the process? Or were they reassessed because Lucy was fighting back, i.e. later in 2016, after a certain amount of time, she lodged the grievance process. She lodged it, and then did that, because that had to be answered. Was that the trigger for the reassessment of her clinical skills, and who undertook that reassessment, and in what form did it take? Either way, no concerns were raised. But I was just interested as to who and why and what was the trigger for that reassessment. And moreover, I was interested that had the grievance not been brought, would a reassessment ever have happened? I suspect not. I suspect not. Because as this Jayaram character has described the island of lost soul, it's just where people go, where they want to put people on ice effectively and just leave them there, isn't it? Doesn't sound like it's a place where they're retraining people, trying to get people back into their original jobs. They're just putting them there. I imagine a lot of them are bullying victims. Maybe not all, but a lot of them, and obviously Lucy Letby is one of them. She's a bullying victim of workplace bullying by these consultants. And unfortunately, the management finally capitulated to them and didn't want to, if it was a choice between upsetting these highly narcissistic group of consultants and putting Lucy away from her job, they chose Lucy as the option that would cause them the less heat, as it were. They were placating the consultants, but anyway, that was just another point I wanted to make. Was it the process of it's getting a bit late, maybe I should have done it. Was it the complaint process, the internal complaint process, the grievance process that forced them to go into the reassessment of Lucy's clinical skills, and then obviously nothing was found because she was due to be coming back. Nothing at all. So that's, at least on the surface, we're in a world here in which nobody's talking about murders explicitly. No one's talking to the management about murders or deliberate harm explicitly. No one. But it's in the rumour mill. It's the rumours that they're spreading around, that Jayaram and Breary are spreading around as they're targeting their quarry, if you will, as they're targeting Lucy Letby as the victim of their bullying. But that's not being done formally. I think that so they couldn't uphold any idea that Lucy Letby was incompetent in any way whatsoever. She was going to be coming back. So she felt more secure about her abilities. She was, quote, very career focused. That's a quote. She was very career focused, she said. That's Lucy Letby saying that. And, quote, it just all overwhelmed me at the time, as it would. It was hard to see how anything was ever going to be okay again. Well, exactly, because she's sort of put in this limbo position in this office, and then Lucy Letby gets things moving. I mean, this goes back to my supposition, and it is a supposition, that had she not brought the grievance, they would have just left her there ad infinitum. And the management have said, "Oh well, we don't have to deal with these group of consultants every other week now." And moreover, the consultants would have left it. I think they would have left it because they'd achieved what they wanted to do, which was to force a competent and good and conscientious nurse out, because she was the target of their bullying. And I think they would have left it there. I don't think they ever would have gone to the police. It's only because Lucy fought back, and for her good name and her honour, and the right thing to do is to say, well, I haven't done anything wrong, incompetent. Well, and so she brought the grievance. And I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect it was that initiated a reassessment of her skills, which was obviously some kind of process done by some of the nurse management, I would assume. No one's ever mentioned going to the NMC, the Nursing and Midwifery Council. No reports to there. So it wasn't that kind of process, which could take a very long time. It was something that was obviously done at the very most in a period of between July and April/May, or even a bit before then, because I think the grievance was upheld earlier in 2017, and they had the management got the They threatened the consultants with reporting them to the GMC. They were found formally guilty of bullying. So when I'm saying that they're bullying her, it's not in my head. It was found that they were doing that. The grievance was upheld, and they had to write the letter of apology. All four of them did, and only Jayaram out of the four met her in person in a mediation session. Brewery wouldn't do it, Gibbs wouldn't do it, and Dr. B presumably wouldn't do it. Only he did, and he did it in a sort of half-cocked way, really. But that's another thing for the moment. So Lucy's saying it's hard to see how anything could ever be okay again. In an interview 2 days later with the police, an officer asked why one of her notes had the word hate in bold letters circled. What's the significance of that? The officer asked. That I hate myself for having let everybody down and for not being good enough. So she's being punished. I think I mentioned this in videos a long time ago, relatively, last year probably. This concept, this sort of under this psychological pressure and torture, as do some of the main fictional characters in Franz Kafka's work, they're being punished by some authority, but they're not being told what they've done wrong, but they're being punished. So the punished individual, and the phrase goes as follows, that they seek their crime. They don't know what their crime is, but they are being punished and they're not being told what they've done wrong. So under that psychological pressure, they seek their crime. In other words, they think, well, I must have done something wrong. What did I do wrong? They think I've done something wrong. Well, I've got to find out what it is to stay sane, because to make it make sense. To make it make sense while you're being punished. So what was it I did wrong? And this is a highly, highly conscientious person. And so she's directing all this negative energy at herself, which is so sad and so wrong that she's put herself through that on top of it. But that's how, like she says, that's how that system and the way they've treated her, this is how the bullying makes the victim feel. It's how the victim is made to feel by this bullying, by this scapegoating, that has now involved the whole employer, really, hasn't it? Because they capitulated to the consultants and took her away from nursing duties without any evidence at all, without any evidence other than consultants going up to the nurse managers and saying, we just don't feel comfortable. And they go, well, as Alison Kelly said, well, I can't just remove a nurse because you don't feel comfortable. Where's the evidence? Well, we haven't got any evidence. I just don't feel comfortable. Come on, please. So Lucy's saying that I hate myself for having let everybody down, for not being good enough. She goes on to say, I've just been removed from the job I loved. I was told that there might be issues with my practice. See how vague it is? There might be issues with my practice, not being told what it is. How unfair is she being treated? It's abysmal, it's abhorrent. And she goes on to say, I wasn't allowed to speak to people, close quote. And that's just that puts the seal on it, isn't it? This isolation. Again, another tactic of a bullying group of people, plus now effectively a bullying employer per se, because they've put her in a position and told her she's not allowed to speak to anyone. So she's been bullied and she's isolated, and the isolation is part of the bullying, part of the psychological breaking down of someone. It's victimizing them. And then she writes these things down to try to deal with all these conflicting emotions, all these painful emotions about being hounded. She writes them down to get it out of her system, perhaps as some formal part of cognitive behavioural therapy, but whether it was or wasn't, it doesn't matter. Just writing things down, just to get it out, to release some of the pressure. And then that was turned against her by the police and the prosecution and the media and the public. So she's absolutely terrorised, and then tries to get it out of her system and to work it out and to find some kind of light or sanity in this situation where she's being effectively driven mad. And then in her attempts to do that are then turned against her. It's monstrous. It's evil, actually. This is profoundly evil, what's happened. It's not a mistake. It's evil what's happened to her. I wasn't allowed to speak to people. The officer asked again why she had written, "I killed them on purpose." Lucy answers, quite understandably, "That's how I was being made to feel." Exactly, that is how she was being made to feel. And worse than that, being made to feel that, and not being given any reasons why, but simply being made to feel it and being hung out to dry in this admin job. That's how I was being made to feel. It's completely understandable, isn't it? As her mental health deteriorated, which it obviously would, anyone's would. Most people would have probably. It's incredible strength that she got up, the strength to take the grievance out. Most people would have gone, well, they're destroying me. I've got a. Most people would have said, I've had enough. I'll go off sick. I've had enough. I'll leave this hospital. I'll get a job somewhere else. Or I'll stop nursing. They've bullied me out of nursing, which effectively they would have been happy for that as well. They never would have contacted the police down the line. Never would have contacted anyone. They just would have got rid of a really good, conscientious nurse. As her mental health deteriorated, her thoughts had spiralled. Quote, "If my practice hadn't been good enough, and then I was linked with these deaths, then it was my fault," she said. In other words, she's internalizing the bullying and turning it in on herself. Because it's like a total system she is in, and this employer, the NHS, and she's been training for this job, went to college, and been doing it since she was very young, since she came out of the college. It's her life, and it's all turned against her, and then she's internalizing all that negativity and that accusation that's been put at her. But it's a very sneaky, sly kind of accusation in a way that, well, we are going to punish you for what you've done wrong here, but we're not going to tell you what you've done. We're punishing you for what you've done wrong, and we're not going to tell you what you've done. And this is this bit now. This is why I wasn't sure whether to read this, because it's so painful to read what this poor young woman was put through. One of the officers, whoever they are, says, "You're being very hard on yourself there if you haven't done anything wrong." And Lucy says, "Well, I am very hard on myself," she said. And there you have it. And the crux point there is that you can see this is a person who, highly sensitive, highly conscientious person, who's being destroyed, and her whole confidence has been destroyed and shattered. And then she's blaming herself on top of it because of what they've done to her. And then she's internalizing their aggression in a sense and compounding it towards herself. And that's what often victims of bullying and by very narcissistic psychopathic people can end up doing. And that's part of the destruction of a person, a destruction of their psyche. I'm going to leave it there. I don't want to do videos that are too long. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'll carry on with it. And there's other sections coming up in which there's definitely some more things I really want to sort of comment on, really. Thanks for listening if you have, and all the best. Take care.